This episode of Lost in the Supermarket is brought to you by cannedbeans.org, sponsored by Bush's Best, a category-building marketing campaign aimed at promoting the universal health benefits of canned beans, regardless of brand. Containing fiber, protein, and iron, canned beans make it easy to add more plants to your diet and help people live longer, healthier lives. Visit cannedbeans.org for tools, recipes, and resources. Welcome to RDBA's Lost in the Supermarket. This week, we're going to unwrap the current realities of food packaging. Now, no question, especially since the pandemic, food packaging is in the news. During the past year, there have been more than 250,000 news reports about food packaging. Everything from edible packaging to eco-friendly packaging and single-use plastics are creating headlines and generating interest. Now, in order to help our retail RDs cut through the headlines, gain clear understanding about food packaging benefits and risks as it relates to food safety, health threats, food waste, environmental impact, and more, what we're going to do is we're going to have a great conversation with David Smith. David is an expert when it comes to packaging. And what I love about his bio is it formulates strategies to extract value from science, to capture consumer differentiation in the marketplace, and to drive sustainable revenue growth. David was in charge of global packaging for J&J, for Campbell Soup, and now has his own consulting firm where he helps a myriad of companies and organizations understand what's going on in the food packaging industry and to highlight, frankly, some of the most common misconceptions. We want to get rid of those today so that when you're talking to your shoppers, you can also help get the truth out there. David's insights when it comes to food challenges for companies are critical. You know, it's easy for us to say, oh, you should do this, but reality has to say that how do we do this affordably? How do we do this and not risk, product integrity? All of this stuff is something that's critical for companies and organizations and retail dietitians to really understand. So, David, welcome to Lost in the Supermarket.
All right, thanks, Phil.
So, David, how would you characterize the current state of food packaging here in the U.S.?
Very dynamic and very exciting and tons of opportunity. Lots of great stuff going on in packaging. And it's an area of great opportunity for companies and for consumers.
And what are some of the challenges that companies are really faced with these days?
Well, like every other industry and situation today, certainly supply chain issues are affecting everybody. But in normal packaging, challenges are providing safety is of the utmost concern, protecting the product, the food, and then also providing consumers with a convenient package that works for them.
And what about the whole cost implication for food companies? I remember when I used to buy cheese, for example, it would come shrink wrapped or overwrapped in plastic. I'd have to cut it open and then either saran wrap around it or put it in a Ziploc bag. Now most cheese is coming in a Ziploc. I'm going to assume that as a result of that, prices went up.
It's all about consumer value. So sometimes prices go up with convenience, sometimes they don't, because there's things the companies can do to offset that so consumers don't necessarily face an increase in costs. So, one thing my team did many years ago was create the current Oreo package that has a resealable tray. Prior to that, many of us remember it was in a cellophane bag with a paper label that everybody hated. You had the best cookie in the world and the worst package in the world. That one, we actually were able to offset the increases. The materials were clearly more expensive because we were able to do things differently in the factories and make it a much more efficient process. So overall, our costs actually stayed the same.
So, talk to me about that decision-making process. So, you and your team say, okay, we got the best cookie in the world, we've got the worst package in the world, and somebody, you presumably, have to go to senior management and say, okay, I want to change our package. What was that conversation like?
Anytime you want to change anything, you had mentioned I worked at Campbell's as well and Johnson and Johnson. I've been lucky enough to work on really truly iconic brands, Oreo certainly being one of them. You don't mess around with stuff arbitrarily. So you mentioned you want to make a change in Oreo anything. It's no, it's the first answer. Leave it alone. And then it's okay. What are you talking about? And we do it very carefully and very thoughtfully, and lots of input from all over expertise in the company to make sure you're doing this right. And the first thing is, of course, making sure this is what consumers truly want, making sure we can truly deliver that. The last thing you want is to disappoint a consumer buying one of those iconic brands. So it's a very careful step-by-step process.
So, when I look at packaging, I really think of two packages that are the perfect package, one being cans and the other one being glass.
Yeah, glass is great. Consumers really like glass. The experience of using it presents high quality. It's very protective. Both the can and the glass that you mentioned are both very protective, and they really, we didn't talk about it, but the function of the package is really right there. So they both provide, stability. They protect from bad things going in, and they protect from good things going out. Um, and they do a really good job. So consumers really like glass. Glass is very recyclable as well. It's easy to get into the recycle streams. It's high quality. The negative with glass is it's heavy for the package.
Exactly where I was going. Right.
That's really generated a lot of the changes from glass to plastic because of the shipping aspects and the weight that's involved. You save a tremendous amount of money in shipping product because we do ship product all over the country, if not all over the world. Um, and you incur significant costs. We all know what the gas pump looks like these days. So the transportation issue is a big one for glass packaging.
And for me, it's even just coming home from the supermarket. If I've got a bag that has three or four glass jars in it, it's a lot heavier, to your point, than if it were three or four cans. What are the most common types of packaging that are being used for foods today?
So you mentioned two. So clearly the metal can and the cans consumers are used to for things like soup and stews and things like that are typically steel cans. So we put beans in steel cans. The other type of can that everybody's very familiar with is the aluminum can, typically in the beverage area. Again, all the same positives. It works great. It's very recyclable. You mentioned glass is another terrific one. All sorts of plastics. Paper is a huge one because all the other packages typically come in a corrugated box, which is paper. Again, very highly sustainable, very good in the recycled chain. Consumers don't see it a lot. You see it a lot if you go to a warehouse club or something like that, where all the corrugated is there for you to take your stuff home in. But it is very recycled. It's almost 100% recycled corrugated board. And then some other plastics to have different functionality. So it's a complicated package in those circumstances.
What we're seeing around the world is that a lot of retailers want to get away from plastic packaging, more into cans, more into glass. Some even, bring your own containers from home and buy bulk and put it in those containers. Is this move away from plastic good for us? Is it threatening to the integrity of the food, the safety of the food?
Listen, I think we've got to be responsible, and that's the main thing. And there's absolutely a place for plastic packaging in our consumer world. It provides a great package. It provides some really positive qualities. As you mentioned, it's much lighter. A lot of the packages are see-through, which consumers really like. Another aspect of glass that's a positive. Um, and it provides benefits at a very nice cost benefit for the companies. So I don't think plastics are necessarily bad. I think certainly here in the US, we've got to get better at our recycling potential. The materials are recyclable, whether or not they're recycled in our consumer waste streams here in the US. Our municipalities aren't very well prepared to do that. There's a lot better situation in Europe and other parts of the world that the municipalities are much better prepared to handle the different streams of plastic, the different types of plastic, the different colors, the different materials. But there's a big effort. The manufacturers, the packaging manufacturers globally are very focused on looking at different ways to provide a more sustainable plastic packaging. Use one material versus 3 or 4 materials in the plastic package. Use lighter weight material, and provide more opportunities to provide recycled material in the plastic.
So let's pretend I'm a food manufacturer. I've got this product. You mentioned beans. I want to go to market with beans. How do I figure out what's the right package for that product?
Yeah, we're typically starting with manufacturers that already have some sort of base of equipment. So that's a big one for any manufacturer. What do you already have? The equipment to make these packages at the rates we need and the size and magnitude of the brands that we have in the US in particular require expensive capital. So if you have capital, you want to use that. So that's a big consideration. Equally as important is what the consumer wants. So CPG companies, as you know, do extensive amounts of research to find what's preferred for the consumer. Do they want the can? Do they want a plastic? Do they want a see-through? Do they want an easy open? So most CPG companies really spend a lot of time, effort, and dollars talking to consumers to find out what they really want. And then we provide it. That's what these large companies, and I've been privileged to work for many of them, can provide to consumers. Sometimes different packages are conducive for different retail environments, and how that stands up on the shelf, and how we can provide that best to the consumer.
So you mentioned the recyclability aspect of plastic. How important today to the consumer is recyclability and sustainability?
It's an interesting one, like many aspects, and I know you've talked to consumers a lot and have a lot of experience in this, where consumers say one thing and their actions aren't necessarily the same thing. I think they have good intent. I think we're at a point now where people understand sustainability, recyclability. All those nice words are really important. It's not a buzzword. It's not a trendy thing anymore. It really is important. The issue comes in are you willing to pay? Because in today's environment, particularly, let's focus on plastic for a minute. Recycled plastic actually costs more than the virgin materials that we get from typically oil-based derivatives. So if I'm looking at, one of the common plastics is polyethylene. If I'm looking at polyethylene or polypropylene, it's cheaper for me to get virgin material that's never been used before, right, made from the oil substrate, than it is for me to get recycled material. All the cleaning and handling that a manufacturer has to do adds into that cost. We're at a point where it used to be the quality might not have been so good for recycled material. Now quality is excellent. Our packaging manufacturers have done a fantastic job of being able to provide really high quality plastic materials, both from a functional standpoint and from an aesthetic standpoint, that consumers probably can't tell the difference. The issue comes in cost, and are you willing to pay? So that was an issue I've faced with a lot of the brands that I've worked on, where we would come as the packaging team saying, we can provide a more sustainable package. Wouldn't that be good? And the brand owners, typically the marketing folks, sometimes the finance guys, would come and answer, yes, but I need it at the same cost. And today that's not a feasible situation. So you do have to drive consumer value. And if the consumer doesn't see the value of paying a nickel more or a dime more for that package, it's a big challenge to do that.
So, David, I want to put you on the spot.
Okay.
One one answer. If you had to pick one kind of packaging that is the best packaging for food, what would it be?
I'll answer you what you asked. It's impossible because all this is very customized, right? A specific food needs a specific package, so there's not one answer for everything. But that said, I honestly think that the mainstays of metal cans and glass is pretty similar. Uh, they're probably the best in that they can provide um, the functionality that the consumer needs, in that the food is safe, the food's high quality, the food has a reasonable shelf life that you don't have to eat it in a day before it spoils. And for the manufacturers, it provides um, a good way for them to convey the product that they're making through the supply chain into the consumer's home. Um, so they do a great job. That's not to bash any other packaging. And again, it's very, very specific. There's not one solution for everything. So we do have a ton of different.
Of course, because you've got to look at what the ingredients are, how it relates to the package. Um, Very complicated, but I appreciate you giving me that one answer. What are consumers confused about? What are their misperceptions as it relates to packaging?
I mentioned one about cans and preservatives. Cans, another one was the BPA situation that we had a few years ago of consumers thinking this material was really bad. All the science told you there was no issues. It's used at such a small level that there were no issues from a real science standpoint. But that said, it caused a lot of consternation, and we saw, as manufacturers, we saw what the consumers wanted, and that was to take it out. So we took it out. Um, I think the issue of plastics and it's very confusing to consumers because it's complicated. So there are a lot of opportunities for us to, I think, do a better job of communicating to the consumers what things they should be concerned with, what things they shouldn't, and where their options are.
So, David, you've got this audience of retail dietitians across the country watching you, listening to you. What are some things that you would like to make sure that these supermarket retail dietitians know for themselves about food packaging, as well as being able to communicate it to their shoppers?
Sure. I think the first thing, or the main thing, is really that packaging is a real tool for them. They want to provide lots of options for the consumers to be able to eat all the great foods that are all over the supermarket in all the aisles. So packaging helps them do that by pointing to different areas. So we certainly have the fresh aisle, we certainly have the canned food aisle, we have the packaged food aisle. That all these areas and the packages can help the dietitians to make sure that the consumers are getting the balanced diets that they're recommending. I think the other thing they can do is look at the packaging to provide portions, and I know they do this in a lot of the recipes where they say, "Gee, 1 can of this is
Right.
perfect for a recipe for chili or something like that." So I think they can really look at the options that are out there in sometimes smaller packaging, larger packaging, to again help the consumer to make better choices out there.
So, when a shopper goes up to an RD and they say, again, I want to just pick up on a point that you said before. They pick up a can and they say, what's in this can? How does this product stay so long with a shelf life of 6 months or a year on it? What should an RD be telling that shopper?
They should be telling the shopper that that's a really healthful choice, and that there are no preservatives typically in canned food. The canning process itself, which is cooking under pressure, um, eliminates the need for preservatives and really does uh, provide food with a very long shelf life and retain the quality for a very long time in the package. So the can And the process really provides that to the consumer without anything artificial needed in that. That's really the process, the can and the food and the heating process.
Well, David, I could talk to you for hours. Thank you so much for joining us today on Lost in the Supermarket. And I know your insights and your smarts have really helped all the retail dietitians understand more about food packaging.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you.